Okay, so today we're going to be presenting How Do You Like Them Trademarks? And what this project is explaining is the explanation of Apple Corp versus Apple Computer. Now, before we get in, let's talk about some of the key points that are going to be discussed today on what are trademarks, why do we need trademarks, some graphic timelines, Apple versus Apple, the revenge of Apple, trademarks in the Apple cases, why are trademarks important, and a final conclusion. But first, let's dive into a quote by the man himself, Steve Jobs. He has said, "It's more fun to be a pirate than it is to join the Navy." Now, what is a trademark? Well, in the United States definition, trademarks are words, names, symbols, designs, or even a combination of any of those, and they are used to identify the goods of one seller from those of another. They also indicate the sources of goods, as in the picture showing some examples of some trademarks. And when were trademarks invented? Well, trademarks first appeared in the Stone Age when people would brand their animals or their belongings with a specific style of branding to identify their ownership. Then if we jump forward in the future to not modern, but historically in ancient Egypt, branding involved deep grooved markings on stone quarries. They were generally different designs, sizes, and some colored markings showed status, which was more sophisticated for their times. And then we want to talk about why do we need trademarks? Well, the first purpose is it's to distinguish and identify services or goods that a seller or manufacturer sells. That way they know who owns what and not what owns who. Then if we look at the second purpose, the second is to give the public the information about where the logo, brand, or name come from. That way people can identify the source. Then if we look at the third purpose, it offers copyrights and patents to protect different types of intellectual property. That way people's trademarks or people's images aren't being stolen. And then we look at the fourth purpose, or the final. You can create a trademark to make money. You legally own it, you can market it, and you can license it. That way you can make the money you deserve for your trademark. So let's take a look at trademark registration. This is just a graphic that shows you what you have to do to get your trademark registered. On the next graphic, we'll be showing the internet-based trademark recognition timeline, or how slowly over the years you can see how the timeline went from in the late 60s to first computerized trademark search systems, to then starting to be able to recognize trademarks over the years by scanning them, watch services for trademarks, online search tools, trademarks in the environments, broadcasting, and then to more modern searches of images, and even you can figure out and design your own trademarks within 2 days in 2019.
Okay, let's talk now about Apple Corp versus Apple Computer, or Apple Inc., as it's better known today. How the case of trademark affected both these companies. Let's first talk about both of these companies. Let's start with Apple Corp, or the Beatles Corporation. Apple Corp is a multimedia corporation which was founded in London in 1968 by members of the Beatles. They did this to replace their earlier company, the Beatles Ltd., and to form a conglomerate. The main divisions that make up Apple Corp are Apple Records, Apple Electronics, Apple Films, Apple Publishing, and Apple Retail. A couple of these sections haven't done too well, and they've also closed down physical stores, mainly Apple Retail, which wasn't a success. Now let's talk about Apple Inc., or Apple as we know today, Apple Computers. It was founded in 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. It's an American computer manufacturer of personal computers. What they did was create a graphical user interface, and it was the first successful personal computer company and the first one to popularize the graphic user interface. The revenge of the Apple. From 1978 all the way up until the 6th of May 2006, Apple Corp and Apple Inc. were in a very, very long-lasting and very famous trademark dispute. This was obviously not a linear dispute. This was different instances in different moments of time. but they're all interconnected or related. The first one was in 1978 when Apple Corp., the holding company of Apple Records, filed a lawsuit against Apple Computer for trademark infringement. This was only when Apple Inc. was just starting, or they were still called Apple Computers. They didn't have the cash to settle a lawsuit with a multi-million-dollar corporation who was behind the Beatles. This lawsuit was settled 3 years later for a estimated sum of $250 million. However, it turned out that the real amount was only $80,000. The agreement between the two companies was that Apple Computer would never enter into the music business, and Apple Corporation would never enter into the computer business. Then again, in 1991, Apple Corp. Sued Apple Computer again, alleging that by adding sound to the computer, it was in violation of the 1981 agreement. This time, Apple paid $26.5 million, and the computer giant agreed that it would never be involved in digital music. It would not package, sell, or distribute any physical materials such as music materials such as CDs. The climax of the dispute happened in around 2003 when Apple unveiled iTunes. Apple Corp. Once again sued Apple Computer for the breach of contract, and this case was heard in the High Court of London in 2006 in front of a single judge, who eventually ruled in favor of Apple Computer. Apple Corp. Alleged that the iTunes Store music violated the contract agreement between the two companies because they were selling and distributing music, which they had promised not to do. But the main issue that was resolved in the 1981 agreement was that they would not distribute physical copies, such as CDs, which they were not doing. The iTunes distribution format is strictly digital, which is sort of what led to the judge choosing the side of Apple Computers. In the case of Apple, as well, due to the trademark infringement, profits and trademark violations. In the case of Apple, they were practically making nothing off of selling music. Each song was sold for 99 cents, and 65 cents of those 99 went to the actual owner, whereas the 25 cents went to pay for distribution costs, and the rest was left for Apple as a profit, which leaves Apple with almost nothing of revenue from selling the songs. Where they really made their money was selling the hardware, which allowed them to listen to the digital music, like its iPod or iPhone, that's where they would really reap their profit. In actuality, Apple Corporation is trying to save the legacy of the Beatles, and eventually they joined with Apple Computers to sell the Beatles music through iTunes. Today, they have $24.8 million in revenue. It compromises 16 workers, and they're still the owners of Apple Records, which still produces music. Apple Inc. or Apple Computers is one of the most valuable companies in the world right now. They have a yearly revenue of $274.5 billion. They have 147,000 workers, and after losing the lawsuit, each company, they parted their own ways. Apple Inc. or Apple Computers being the clear winner due to the massive success of iTunes and the billions that it made Apple.
Apple Corp. Lawsued Apple Computer for breaking Longhorn law and acquiring a name that was on the registration. First of all, Apple Corp. Had to prove that their brand was in commercial use and that it was distinctive, and therefore valid and entitled to protection. Also demonstrate that Apple Computer used a similar trademark in commerce in connection with the sale of goods without their consent. Another thing that they had to prove was that Apple Computer's use of the brand was confusing for the consumer, and they could associate that the product of one company came from the other. In this case, the product did not compete directly for sale. This is why lab test was performed, which consists of a series of questions to determine the likelihood of confusion. The lab test is made up of 7 questions. These are the strength of trademark owner's trademark, the degree of similarity between the trademark owner's trademark and the allegedly infringing mark, evidence of real consumer confusion, the marketing channels used, the type of goods involved and the degree of the care that the buyer is likely to have to exercise, the intention of the alleged infringer while selecting the mark, other facts showing that the consumer public is likely to expect that the trademark owner to manufacture a product on the alleged infringer's market, or likely to spend to that market. Consumer purchasing decisions are influenced by trademark and the reputation such brand represents. In this case, you can see why trademarks are so important, because without it, Apple Corp wouldn't have had the legal protection it had and would have had to face the consequences of having another company with the same name. Trademarks can convey intellectual and emotional attributes and messages about your company and your company's reputation, products, and services. If another company uses the same brand, the values and message it is spreading can be harmful to your own company, and it's very likely that it doesn't fit with the company's philosophy and customers could get confused. This could cause all the work behind a company to improve the company's image and positioning to be useless. Customers know who you are and how to find you through your brand. If this isn't inclusive, customers might come to think that it's the same company, or that the fact of not having clear which company it is generates distrust and consequently a loss of money. In order to better understand the consequences of not having a trademark, let's compare these two examples that are similar to Apple case. The case 1, Louis Vuitton and Louis Vuitton Duck. The Louis Vuitton Duck was a South Korean fried chicken restaurant. The restaurant's name was too similar to the brand name Louis Vuitton. Also, the logo and packaging of the restaurant were resembling very much to the designer's iconic imagery. Case 2. Zara Food versus Zara Fashion. Zara Food was a restaurant which was operating in Delhi under the same name of Zara Fashion. If it's highly possible that any consumer could confuse one for the other and take into consideration that the restaurant was started by the fashion brand. In these two examples, we can see that the confusion that can produce the similarity of the two brands can be very harmful. If in these two cases the restaurant had a bad reputation, the other two fashion companies would see the consequences on their sales, and the customer could come to have a bad image of their company. So, if you want to start a business, make sure you are not accidentally copying another company, as it could cost you a lot of money. And also make sure you are not copied and register your brand so you can guarantee that you will be legally protected in case your brand is plagiarized.
To conclude, this presentation was supposed to show you what trademarks are, where did they come from, how old trademarks are, and how trademarks were used to implement the Apple cases, to even some modern trademarks being used in some cases today, similar to the Apple situations. And then we want to talk about Apple for a quick minute. Now, the name Apple Corp belongs to Apple Computer, and they are a big corporation, and their biggest headquarters, or their main headquarters, is Silicon Valley, California. They now have large stores located worldwide where they sell only their products and some products they have bought from other companies. They now include different devices such as cell phones, headphones, watches, iPods, compared to what they used to sell with just computers. And now today, Apple is slowly growing, but successfully on top of the chain. Eventually one day, Apple might dominate the whole world. So this video explanation is just to go more in depth on the Apple cases and their additional information if you would like more information to get to know the Apple cases better. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and I hope you enjoyed.